It's 103. Okay, it's 103. We're going to resume. Okay, thank you. We're going to begin. Okay, before breaking for lunch, we ended with the Battleship Texas, and there were a couple of items that we did not get completed. On beautification, there was a question in reference to, someone referenced to me questioning Christmas decoration that's on Dolan Road. And the question was, who was responsible for it, and will that type of decoration be seen throughout the city?
We've always put decorations up throughout the central business district, and probably maybe 5 years ago, I was approached by a number of the businesses on Dallin Road, specifically between Delaware to 69, and that is the main business corridor, retail corridor in the city of Beaumont. So that's why we put those decorations up, again, between Delaware and 69. That's where our major retail is and major sales tax payers.
Okay.
But we don't have any plans to do it anywhere else. It's very labor extensive, and Keith Folsom and his staff and utilize some other departments to help, but it's there's a lot to it. Probably takes, would you say, a month, Keith, to do everything downtown? And
yeah, spaced out for the time we start, the time we end, then of course everything's got to be picked up after the holidays.
That would be probably something that some of the different organizations and groups might want to get involved in, if they'd like to see them across the rest of the city. Also, on December 1st, we will have our Christmas tree lighting at the event center starting at 6 p.m. City Manager? Starting at 6 p.m. So hopefully everyone will come out and see the lighting of the Christmas tree down at the event center.
Mayor, we're also scheduled to have a community-wide menorah lighting here at City Hall. I'm not sure of the date, but it's, I think, the first weekend. I think it's that first Tuesday in December, right after the City Council meeting.
First Tuesday in December, December 7th.
I think that's right.
Okay. Thank you. So we're going to go ahead.
Mayor, I have one more thing on objective
Sure.
2. As far as beautification and code enforcement, tire shops, the used tire shops in my ward, their storage and disposal of those tires. I mean, they're everywhere. They're an eyesore. I know that's a necessary business. I don't think they've been disposed of properly. I spoke with the fire department about it because I think they're the ones that are supposed to enforce that because it is a fire hazard. But what the people are doing, they'll pay someone to come and pick those tires up, and they'll buy those tires for a couple of bucks each or something. And then instead of going to a proper disposal area, they'll go out. I found them on Terrell Park Road. They'll just go out, pull over, dump them on the side of the road, and keep on going. And that's something Chief White left, but I spoke with him about. Just wanted to bring that up because it is an eyesore. They have them. It's one on 11th and Washington, one on 4th and Washington, one on College Street across from HEB. There's one on Major Drive. They're all over the place, and they're not properly disposing of those tires. And it's something hopefully code enforcement, or the fire department could look into being more aggressive as far as enforcing those ordinances to get them to dispose of these tires properly or store them properly if they'd even. Because you look at a reputable, not reputable, but a place where you buy new tires, You can't see their old tire because they have them stored properly either behind a fence or inside the building, or they get rid of them. But these used tire shops, they just leave them on the property, and it's a major eyesore, and especially along Washington Boulevard. I mean, we fixed that street up and we're trying to beautify it, and we got these thousands of tires just laying out right out front where everybody can see. That's something hopefully we can address.
Councilmember Samuel?
Yeah, I'm not certain if you were here when we first talked about some of the code enforcement stuff. Mr. Manager, are you aware as to whether some of these violations that's been going to municipal court are related to tires enforcement on tire? Because that would be something we can discuss in this workshop that we're going to have on code enforcement. Well, let me straighten that up. The city attorney mentioned to me that's not necessarily code enforcement. When we talk about dealing with the results of code enforcement, filing charges, and they're going to municipal court, then we're talking about the end results of that. So we're not necessarily talking about enforcement. We're talking about
Judicial enforcement.
Yeah, judicial enforcement, okay. So that's what, we talked about some of those, like the weed and trash violations that's being issued by code enforcement, but they're going to our municipal courts. Municipal courts has over 171 active cases just out there.
That was
And
it.
you were here? Okay, so that's the same thing. But I'm seeing it in Ward 3 also. We have a lot of, I'm seeing tires down Helbig Road, down that street that goes from down by the canal. So they're being everywhere. I'm seeing dumping of those everywhere. So we could discuss that in our workshop also, but specifically talk about those type of violations and how they're being rectified.
Thank you. Councilmember Turner?
Mr. Manager, can we add to our workshop on the poles, the light poles, the same one? Is it the We Buy Houses, the signs on like light poles? Is that okay? Is it legal or?
Violations.
It's
The bandit
illegal to-
signs.
It's illegal to put anything in the right of way or on, for example, electrical poles, street poles. That's all illegal. And staff is charged when they see that, go pick them up. And there's a lot out there. You know, we probably need to do another department director run. We used to challenge each other, and we'd go out in a group, 6 here, 6 here.
Who can get the most?
Or four groups of, 3. We divide up and go see who could pick up the most illegal signs within a 2-hour period. And, you have to have basically a rake because a lot of them are posted up high, but all those signs are illegal.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor.
Councilmember Getz?
And also, when they put signs in the right-of-way, and of course, these businesses that do this have their phone numbers too, so we know who's doing it. And, I saw one company come out there and put signs throughout the Dowling West neighborhood repairing chimneys. And they put them just about on every street corner. And, that's not legal, is it, Mr. Manager?
No. And our code enforcement division contacts those companies, ask them to remove them, and then we have what we'll call a robo list. We'll continue to call that business. It's an automatic calling service. We'll call that business over and over and over and leave a message saying your signs are illegal, please pick them up. And that works, but we have a lot of businesses, right, that don't either know what the rules are or don't care, and they'll put signs up all over town. We see them, and we try to address them. It's one of those things you can go clean it up, and then 2 blocks down, someone else is putting out a different sign. It's a never-ending process that we try to stay on top of citywide.
Also, in reference to the tires, they can't be dumped at the landfill, correct?
They can. We will stack and put them in a certain place. And we used to have a company that would come in on a periodic basis and pick them up that wanted them. So I think we're still doing that. We'll double check, but we take them, store them in a certain location. So we could reach out to these businesses and say, look, if you'll bring your tires to the landfill, we'll take them.
Do we charge them?
I don't believe so.
But the thing
I
about
wouldn't wanna
those
charge
businesses,
them.
they charge you, when you buy a tire, they charge you a disposal fee.
They do.
You have to pay, the consumer has to pay for the tire to be disposed, and then they just store it on their property forever
Yeah.
without disposing.
I think the landfill does charge, if I remember correct, I thought it was like $5 a tire.
No, let me double check.
I think
Todd-
we
Todd
could
can check
probably
on that.
override that. Okay, thank you. Go ahead,
Well, I'll leave that for the workshop.
for the workshop. Okay, and two of the other items that we did not get to, objective number 6 was to review the red tag process, see how we could improve it. We know that there's a lot of legalities and protocol that has to take place. Can you just go through, Mr. Manager, the process of the red tag in the house?
Okay, so probably a good time to have another work session on just this matter because we have 2 new council members, and I'd say we do this every 2 or 3 years. We go through the who, what, when, where, why, how the process works. So our staff, right now, there's 350 red tag structures. 64 are in a work program. We have 180 that need to be brought to the city council. And then it's broken down how many are waiting right now for a bid packet, how many are, in the process to be demolished. So 25 temporary restraining orders that tie our hands where we can't do anything. So we have a breakdown of where we are in the process. So we'd be glad to schedule a work session just on that subject, maybe after a normal council meeting, and just kind of talk through how it works and what you have to do by law, what your local ordinance states.
Mayor?
Councilmember Duria?
Whenever we had a work session, I think in dealing with this stuff, I've come to learn that a lot of the holdup is when it has to go to court. And I don't know if some of, in addition to those 170 other cases we have these red tag court cases that also have to go before Judge Lively. So I would, or the other judges over there. So I would hope that they would have a representative from their office to come to the workshop and explain if there's anything they can do on their side to speed the process up.
Yeah, on this one, they're filing temporary restraining orders in state court. So not our municipal court, but over in state court, and it does pretty much place everything on hold until that hearing's held. But we can show that staff's very diligent. What we can probably do better is bring more of them to you at one time. Meaning we could try to bring as many as possible to you at one time. Going back 15, 20 years ago, the council made it clear at one time, don't bring us more than, say, 30 to 50 at one time, because you had a lot of citizens out here, and so staff, we remember that, and that's what we've been doing. So if you want to see more, we can try to do that, meaning bring 75 at one time. If that's what, just think about it. You don't have to make a decision today, but the direction 15 years ago is don't bring more than 30 or 50 structures at one time. So there's a lot in the pipeline. We're spending we've spent more in the last couple of years than we ever have on demolitions, both residential and commercial, trying to clean up the city. No one wants to live by, a substandard structure. And so staff's out there again, citing people every day. If it's open and accessible, if it's boarded up, there's not a lot we can do. But if it's open and accessible and a danger to the public, we write them up.
Well, that's,
Go ahead.
That's one of the things I was about to comment on. It's not, how much, do you have an idea how much we're spending per year on demolition? Because it's not so much, yes, we want to make sure the structure is not accessible. We want to make sure they're boarded up. It's not so much as red tagging them. Yes, we know that's a part of the process. But if we get all these, the problem we have is if we have all these structures red tagged, but we're not able to bring them down, when you red tag them, that is a target for now where you have folks that's homeless going into the structures, breaking into the structures. So I don't think we should be so concerned about how many of the structures we're getting red tagged, but we're gonna have to look at what the amount that we're spending to demolish these structures so we can get these structures down once they're red tagged. Just a couple of months ago, there was one in my ward. It had been red tagged forever, and it just fell down on its own. And that's when we went in, and well, I think that's when I took you.
We went out together and looked at it.
Yeah. So we have to look at how we're going to do this, but we have to figure out how we're going to budget and how much we're going to budget to tearing these structures down. And are there other alternative means of getting funding to remove structures? Is there something else we can do to get help?
Council's been very supportive and up the amount. This year we're budgeted $600,000 in the general fund. And then do you know what the block grant amount is?
I think last time I looked, it was maybe 150, 200,000 out of the block grant also.
It used to be all out of block grant, remember, 20 years ago. And then the council said, look, we got to do more, and you have to spend general fund monies, which is local taxpayers' money. But $600,000 budgeted this year.
Okay. So with that, what we might want to do is, and this is for the entire council to make a decision on, we're finding we're having to demolish more and more of these structures. So we're going to have to find a way to generate revenue from some of these vacant properties that we're tearing down. That could be an issue of getting the homes, getting the property, and doing some land pooling and generating a way. There was a time that we had several chodos in the city that we would work with the chodos in rebuilding homes, building homes. That's one way that we were able to offset the cost of demolition, was by allowing chodos to build homes and getting taxpayers into the homes, paying taxes on the property. That's something, do we still have, are we still doing that with?
I think just one. He's talking about community housing development organizations through our home program, which are federal funds, and we're working with one chodo at this time, is my understanding.
Okay.
We used to have, like you said, 3 or 4.
Right, because I know there were at least 4 divisions within in various wards that helped build up the neighborhood, and we have vacant lots all over the city. So if we can work on land pooling, I think that's something that this council might look at to generate revenues while we're demolishing these structures that are putting our neighborhoods at risk.
Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Getz.
So I don't know if that is what Port Arthur is doing or if it's something different, but I have taken note that they have taken a lot of dilapidated homes near their downtown, demolished homes, and they're rebuilding residential structures near downtown Port Arthur. Councilmember Turner and I went by and drove through some of those, and you know, the key to any downtown's success is to have people living downtown as well as having your businesses downtown. So is there anything that Port Arthur is doing that we should be doing? I don't know, Councilmember Turner, if you know anything more about that, or
Yeah,
Mr.
for that particular program, there was EDC funding that actually built the homes back up, And it went to their voters, and their voters all voted to solicit that funding towards building those neighborhoods back up once they knocked the homes down.
Okay. And one other thing I wanted to ask about, we kind of went over fast, talked about create a clean city campaign. How's that actually going to take place? Who's going to be tasked with doing that? I guess we don't have a Keep Beaumont Beautiful commission anymore. That may have just gone by the wayside, but how's that going to work, Mayor?
As far as who's going to oversee
Yeah,
it?
who's going to create the clean? It says create a clean city campaign. What's the first step into making that happen?
Well, we don't know yet because we've decided that we're going to put all of that into a workshop. We're
Okay.
going to put that into a workshop along with objective number 2 and creating the quarterly cleanup,
Okay.
along with creating a clean city campaign. So once we have the workshop, that's something that we can discuss what department or who will head it.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to move forward to a thriving economy, innovative economy, increased commerce, and employment opportunities within the city. Thank you, Councilmember Turner.
Okay, I'll take this one. So, all council up there, I gave you guys a copy of what we currently offer as the city of Beaumont as far as economic development and our incentives. It's the attachment with Chris Boone at the bottom. So currently what we do in the city of Beaumont, we offer, and I met with Chris on this last week because I knew this was coming up. Currently what we do is we offer neighborhood empowerment zone programs, and that's like fee waivers, expedited permitting, removal of city liens, abatements, and city taxes for up to 7 years for eligible projects within the NEZ zones. And we do a Chapter 380 abatement, state authorized program to offer tax abatements as well as tax rebates to finance infrastructures necessarily for eligible projects. Also able to offer hotel occupancy tax rebates. We do a Chapter 312 abatement, which is a reinvestment zone that I was made aware that is one of our most recent ones, but we have yet to use it. State authorized program of property tax abatement for up to 10 years for eligible projects in identified areas by the state. And a federal opportunity zone. I mean, this last one is the one we haven't used yet. I'm sorry. A new program established as part of the 2017 Tax Act. This program allows significant tax benefits for those invested in qualified opportunity funds, the investment opportunity zone designated by the state of Texas and U.S. Treasury. So what I want to bring to the council's attention is, as far as economic development, right now, the city of Beaumont, we only really offer tax abatements and tax incentives. And the issue is other cities that we're actually, I guess I'll say competing. I don't know if that's the right choice of words, but other cities are offering a lot more than tax abatements. What you're starting to see is cities that are smaller than Beaumont. I'll use Orange as an example, as well as Port Arthur. They're starting to get restaurants and different projects like a business park that we don't even have in Beaumont, Texas. So I just wanted to bring it to the council's attention that when it comes to looking at what we offer compared to what other cities offer, they're really starting to outdo us as far as economic development because we're only offering abatements and they have events more towards EDCs and other type of funding projects to actually offer more than abatements for the particular businesses they want to their area. Some cities offer cash incentives. Some cities offer the abatements with the cash and the EDC funding as well. So right now, I give you an example, walk-ons in Port Arthur. They offered the abatements like the city of Beaumont offered, but they also came with EDC funding to help with all the outside structure of the business. And you see walk-ons ended up located in Port Arthur versus Beaumont. Another example is that—
Before you move on to that, you mentioned the EDC a couple of times. What is the basis, either the city manager or city attorney, in order to have an EDC? What is required of the city in order to have an EDC?
Well, first of all, it will require a favorable vote of the citizens of Beaumont, whether or not they would
Did we,
And that has happened. I don't recall which year that was. The citizens voted against the EDC.
okay.
I don't recall that.
So can you get an EDC without voter approval? So-
It's a tax incentive, and they have to determine what percentage of the tax is going to be devoted to the EDC for incentive monies to these various types of economic developments.
Well, are you familiar with the EDC and what, the percentage, how would that impact our budget if the
So-
voters were to approve an EDC?
So state law allows either a 4A or a 4B. Has to be approved by the voters. And when it was first, I think it was voted on in the 80s, turned down by the citizens of Beaumont. They wanted, when state law was changed to allow for this, it'd be a half-cent sales tax. So right now, Beaumont gets 1.5% of that 8.25%. It's our
Okay, say that again.
Okay, so if you go buy a shirt at Dillard's, for $100, you pay sales tax on top of it, 8.25%. The city of Beaumont gets 1.5% of that. Depending on the year, it's either our number one or number two largest source of revenue, sales tax from that 1.5%. So the voters could have taken half of 1%, so a third of it, and dedicated it for economic development. Like Nederland has done, Port Neches, Port Arthur, a number of cities all over the state of Texas. So they've dedicated that half-cent sales tax to economic development. Our voters said, no, we want that money to go to the general fund. So it brings in somewhere, let's say, $13 to $15 million. That's what half a cent would bring in. So you don't have to, voters wouldn't have to approve that much, but that's the norm. Well, that's a lot of money. So if you took $13 million out of the general fund, how are you going to make up that difference? What are you going to cut or eliminate? Probably nothing. So you'd have to increase the tax rate, the property tax rate, to bring in that same revenue, because that's funding police, fire, EMS, parks, libraries. So again, the voters said, no, we don't want that in Beaumont. That's the history. Could you go back to the voters? The council could. They could put that on the ballot at any time.
So you're saying, in order to get an EDC, if we were to get, and the voters were to approve an EDC, a percentage of the sales tax that we are normally getting would go toward that funding of the EDC. And so we would have to deal with the funds that are no longer coming into our general fund. We would have to make that up either by way of cutting services, cutting employees, or, well, not employees, but we would have to make it up in the budget some way or increase taxes.
Exactly. And if the voters said do this, then you have to create an oversight board. So it wouldn't be the council making these decisions as to where X amount may go to. What they do in a number of cities across the state, they'll take this economic development money and say, look, we're going to give you $300,000 if you build Chick-fil-A here, or we're going to give you $500,000 if you put in this retail development. So that's what they're doing to entice certain development that city wants. But the council doesn't control that. It'd be a new board created. You'd have a say in it, is maybe who you appoint, but you wouldn't have any day-to-day oversight of it per se.
That would be the EDC board.
Mayors, as I understand it, some of these decisions, depending on whether it's a type A or type B EDC, actually goes before the voters to vote on before some of this funding can be used. Is that your understanding, Councilmember Turner?
Yes, correct. One thing about EDCs, our council, no one has to do it like any other city does it. It's normally a half cents, but we could say point whatever type of cents to actually reflect what we actually want to invest in EDC. A half cent, yeah, it'll be $13 million, but we can actually say something a lot less than that. So we're around $2 million we dedicate towards the EDC. A type B, you actually can have council members serve on the EDC, which me personally, I wouldn't be supportive of. I don't think we should serve on it. But a type A, that's when we actually appoint someone to serve on the EDC, and our appointments actually represent us, similar to our other boards that we do it with. And with those appointments, they actually hear different businesses that we want to come into Beaumont. They come do a presentation, and they put them on a list to do a special election. This is how they previously did it in Port Arthur. There would be a special election, and the voters were able to go in and vote and say, hey, we want walk-ons. Yeah, let's give them funding. Or we want Chick-fil-A. Let's give them funding. And what they didn't want to support, they actually didn't vote on it. So though it was the taxpayers' money, it actually went to a vote, not only from the board, but it went a step further, and the community got to have a special election to actually vote on what they wanted in Port Arthur and what they didn't want in Port Arthur. And they do the same thing in Orange.
And that was after the citizens voted in favor of a CDC.
Yes, sir. Correct. So in the 80s, every city around us approved it except for Beaumont.
And so that was in the 80s, obviously 45 years ago, or, you know, so that's a long time ago. Sentiment may have changed, and so maybe that is something we need to look at. I have a question about 380 funding. Mr. Manager, when is the last time the city of Beaumont, if you're aware of, offering a Chapter 380 abatement for any project?
I believe we have a 380 agreement with Beaumont Enterprise Marine Products. We entered into it maybe 4 years ago. I think we have a 380 and a 312.
Okay. We have a 380 and a 312 with Beaumont Enterprise. It's not something that I'm aware of that we do very frequently, and
Those are the only two I'm aware of.
it's a very flexible tool that we don't utilize very often, and maybe we ought to consider ways that we can use a 380 abatement.
We had a proposed 380 with the proposed hotel water park at Ford Park.
Right.
That didn't go through, but we, the council, blessed it and offered it to them, but it didn't go through.
But we also use our hot tax with our CVB, Conventions Visitors Bureau, which is part of the Chapter 380, right?
Well, it's separate and apart, but that was hotel, you're right, hotel occupancy tax money was a part of that agreement. It was just one aspect of the economic incentives that the city council approved.
Okay, thank you,
But Mayor-
Councilmember Neal.
Do you have to have an EDC to make a cash incentive
No.
offer?
No.
No.
So the council could offer a cash incentive on any project without it going through a EDC?
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
That was my next question. I briefly met with Kyle when I first got on the council, and he kind of gave me some different options that I kind of, now that we in this workshop, since we're on the topic of what we offer compared to other cities, I kind of want to see what other options are out there.
Yeah, there's tax abatements. You could provide direct incentives with money, like the mayor just mentioned, Councilmember Neal just mentioned. You could do that. Philosophies of city councils change, as we talked about earlier, every few years. Going back, I can tell you 10 years, 20 years, even before that, the philosophy of every council, maybe up until now, was we don't want to spend local taxpayers' money incentivizing retail and restaurants that compete against people that are already here and well established. And take for example whether Lowe's, Home Depot, Sutherland's, the privately owned business on College that everyone goes to. Meaning councils have never wanted to give money to Costco to come in and compete against existing businesses, or give money to a certain barbecue restaurant and come in and compete against folks that have been here for 50 years. So that's just been the mindset for a long time. That can change. That's, again, up to each governing body. I'm just trying to give you the history of the thought process of kind of where we are today. I've only seen councils incentivize manufacturing and industrial petrochemical projects.
And you want to be careful as not to give unconstitutional gifts to private enterprise. CDBG monies have economic development incentives built into those, and we've used those in the past. But general fund money, taxpayer money, you want to be careful about.
Thank you.
Well, that raised a question that I had, because it was said we can give money directly, and then you just gave a cautionary note as to being careful about that. So where is that line? I mean, I guess you have to determine that there's a public purpose.
And there has to be a program, as I just indicated, the CDBG monies. CDBG program has
Have
monies in them
guidelines.
for incentives
But
in certain neighborhoods.
But I thought I understood from Councilmember Neal's question to the manager, do you have to have an economic development commission in order to be able to give directly funding out? And the manager said, no, you don't. But you're saying
But
be careful.
I was helping clarify that for him. It has to be a public purpose in it. You just can't give city money away. It would be an unconstitutional gift.
I understand that. So help further clarify, can you do it or not? Can you?
Let me try to help him.
Okay.
You wouldn't want to give direct money, say write a check to some retail business for $500,000. What we've done in the past is helped put in a street to facilitate the development, or help put in utilities for certain development. I mean, people think we were a big part of Crockett Street. We weren't. That's all privately owned. However, the city did put in the street, brick paved the street, which served a public purpose, and we also put in the arches. The city paid for that, and so you can help facilitate private development. You just need to be careful, probably writing them a blank check, which we haven't done.
So similar to the type A, that's basically what the type A mainly does for things like restaurant. They help with maybe the outside sign. They can fund things only in the outside of the building. Maybe the light structure, the streets, maybe the sign, maybe with a little bit with landscaping. They can't go on the inside and fund anything. Instead of giving them a check, they actually pay for things that happen on the outside of the building or the shopping strips. Kind of similar to what Kyle just stated.
So what type of incentives did we offer to our enterprise zones?
It's just tax abatement. So, for 1 year to 10 years, council, we've structured it different ways, and y'all approve it. So you'll say if you build this facility or this petrochemical complex or whatever it may be, basically they'll continue to pay taxes on the existing infrastructure at the same amount. And then whatever that new increment is, or the new amount that shows up eventually on the tax roll, then they'll get an abatement on that amount for, again, could be 1 year to 10 years. So it's usually structured, and y'all approve every one of these. It's based on the capital investment, and then a lot of times y'all have considered how many jobs are created. Construction jobs, full-time jobs, part-time jobs, that's all taken into consideration. So I think we have 25 to 30 industrial agreements right now. And I don't know, on average, maybe one, it depends, but y'all probably consider probably one tax abatement agreement a year.
How many enterprise zones do we have?
Well, you have one enterprise zone or two, but you have a number of reinvestment zones, which are in specific targeted areas throughout the city, mostly in the south end and north end that meet certain census tract criteria.
And the only thing we give is tax abatements for those enterprise zones and relief on application fees and things like that.
Exactly.
What other incentives are there that would be possible aside from just cash contributions?
You could probably help with water and sewer extensions if you wanted to. You have to be careful how you do it.
But that would be within the zone.
You could do that anywhere, just have to justify the public purpose. Street and drainage improvements to facilitate a certain development on a certain site. Fee waivers, expedited review process. You know, and as you allude to, within these zones, you can provide tax abatements. You know, and there's historical tax abatements under state law, which Crockett Street received. Some other developments downtown were eligible for up to a 10-year tax abatement on their investments.
Okay, Councilmember Getz and Councilmember Duria.
So I want to talk a second about the Gateway Shopping Center area. And we're all probably familiar with, other than Jason's and Conn's, that shopping center is just about vacant. I don't know who owns it. I don't know who manages it. But I do believe it is one of the economic empowerment zones, the Gateway area. And I'm wondering, is there anything, or would it even be desirable for the city to try to reach out to those people and try to do something to help bring that area back to life? Because it's right in the middle of the city. It's right there on I-10. I don't understand why they struggle the way they do. Or do we want to just leave that to the private sector and stay away from it? I don't understand, but it looks depressing to see all of it just shuttered. And I'd like to hear other council members' thoughts on that particular area right in the heart of our city, if anybody cares to comment on it.
I will. Kyle, out of curiosity, the area where the Exogen Gym is, they redid that shopping strip. Did the private entity just do it on their own, or?
All private.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm just asking out of curiosity because I have seen a lot of excitement, in the community and via social media just from the upgrade and facelift. So that's why I was asking, and it kind of made me think about Gateway Shopping Center as well because, of course there's private entity, but just I don't know if we can see where their head is on maybe doing some improvements.
That strip center you mentioned is owned by a couple of private owners that live in Beaumont, and they bought the one to the east of them. There were 2 strip centers actually there, and they bought the other one within the last probably 6 months, and so therefore they're spending a lot of money, which is great for the city of Beaumont, renovating that entire, which is now going to be one strip center. And to Councilmember Getz's point, y'all could charge or reach out to the Beaumont Chamber to reach out to the owners of Gateway to say, hey, we're here. These are the incentives, which they already have on their Beaumont Chamber's website, but here's the incentives the city of Beaumont offers, which they'd be eligible for because it's in a different census tract. You could probably do something at Gateway.
So the smartest route with that is for us as a council to reach to the chamber and let the chamber kind of.
I think the city's funding them $85,000 a year, so that's what they're charged to do, is kind of be our economic development marketing arm. And if the council, again, it's up to y'all, if 4 of you said, hey, look, we'd like to possibly see improvements at the Gateway Shopping Center, you could reach out to the chamber for them to do that. And it's better to come from the council as a whole instead of, one of you reaching out, maybe a second one over here. Then again, people don't know, am I supposed to go out and really work on this just because one council member wants us to? Or again, that's why it's better if it's coming from the council as a whole.
Councilmember Getz.
Mr. Manager, when you first were hired with the city, I believe you've stated before that you were hired to do economic development, and I'm wondering how those roles have changed. Do we have somebody on staff doing what you were doing then, or have we kind of moved that over to the Chamber of Commerce to do? Because the chamber was there then too, but help me understand how the city's role may have changed in economic development from when you were first hired on as to where we are now.
Okay, I'll answer it this way. I think when I was hired in 1993, we had 8 or 9 people upstairs in our office. Eight for sure, I think 9. Now we have 4. I've never had an assistant city manager in 20 years. Never wanted one and haven't had one. What I'm trying to say is we've streamlined the operation. So the way economic development works is we have a department director, Chris Boone, over planning and community development. That encompasses planning, CDBG, home funds, building codes, code enforcement, transit. I mean, he's got a lot on his plate. But so he works with a lot of leads in the chamber. Our CFO, Todd Semino, and I, with help from the city attorney, negotiate all those industrial agreements together. So that's 25 to 30. They're going to expire in September of this year. And then people reach out to me, and I'll work depending on what the project is. I'll bring in Bart Barkowiak, I'll bring in Mike Harris, I'll bring in Molly Villarreal, depending on the project. But Todd and I are at the table pretty much every time with the city attorney. And so we're working with 2 or 3 companies right now that it's not public yet, but that's just what we do, you know. So we work with those prospects until it's ripe, and we can come to you. And they get tired of me saying this, but I try to, over the years, teach them, you know, look, you got to know the who, what, when, where, why, cost before we go to the city council and lay out not what we're trying to do. In this case, it's what is that prospect wanting to present to our council. So they need to answer those questions to staff first before they come up here. And you're like, why are you bringing this company to us? We don't even know anything. Meaning they need to be at a point where they're really trying to move forward. But to answer your question, it's a team effort. It's about 5 or 6 key staff members. Don't necessarily, I mean, the chamber's great to work with. They don't, meaning when they bring it to us, it's because it's a proposed agreement, whether it's a tax abatement agreement or go on down the list, that y'all have to approve. But in short, yeah, I was the economic development director for a while, but I'm still kind of doing that. I don't have the title, but I'm working with key staff to bring these projects forward. And 99%, they're reaching out to us. We're not going after them like you would in the 1960s and 70s, because we don't have really any carrots to give them. Meaning, yeah, we can do the tax abatement agreements, but there's no direct money. We don't land bank and give them any land or provide land. We just provide incentives that y'all approve.
So that kind of brings us to the topic that we're at now. It kind of shows us as a council and as a city of Beaumont where we stand as far as economic development incentives compared to some of the other cities. And we honestly probably need to get pretty serious about what direction we'll go in the future as far as our economic development. Maybe have a workshop. Maybe somebody could come down and better explain the whole EDC theory to all of us and kind of see how we feel about possibly exploring the option of maybe putting it on the ballot and just seeing how the voters feel in the future.
But the one thing you have to do, you have to make sure that the voters are educated to know.
That's why I think it's key. 2023 is almost a year and a half away. I think now's the time to start looking at it and doing different things if council is supportive of it. I know it's something I'm very interested in, but now's the time that maybe if council is supportive of it, we got more than enough time to actually kind of educate the people in the community on what all it entails and what is happening. And I think the best one would be the A, whereas the voters would always have a say in what comes and goes in Beaumont. I think that's an easy way to be transparent, and they would have input, and it would always go to that when it comes to what comes and goes in Beaumont.
What we could also do is, I'd be more than happy to reach out to TML, which is Texas Municipal League, who would have all of the laws, the regulations, to give us some information for a workshop. Okay? Councilman
Well-
Doria.
One question. Councilman Turner, you said the type A EDCs, they pay for stuff outside of the building. That's what they use the money for. The manager said over there on Crocker Street, we pay for like the paving of the street and things outside the building, and we also have other incentives. If that's something that we're already doing, as far as providing incentives and being able to pay for those type of things that a type A EDC pays for, then what would be to the advantage of the city to have the type A EDC?
So type A goes a step further because you can actually do park improvements or improvements to things as far as education. You look at Lamar University downtown in Port Arthur, EDC funding played a major role in the developments of those apartments and everything downtown in Port Arthur where the students actually live at. So the EDC funding can play a role in park improvements. It can play a role in streets and drainage. It can play a role in infrastructure, and it can also play a role in economic development, whereas we can kind of, the businesses that we want to see come to Beaumont, you know, you don't have to go after just a barbecue shack. You can go after things that we actually do not have. Like, you know, something to the magnitude of, just thinking out loud, you can look at a Dave and Buster's, something that we have for, you know, something that we want to see in this area that we don't even have. Even something as simple as a water park. And if one more thing that we're on this topic, I talked to Todd recently about it, and we're talking about economic development. So it's a new bill that just passed, and Todd briefed me on it a little bit, but I like to at least put it on the council's mind so y'all can know what it is, and maybe it's something we may be interested in looking at a later date. But I forgot the exact bill. But Todd, can you kind of explain that the hotel occupancy, the new?
Before we move to a new one, I do want to address something with this, before we move on. I understand the need for workshops on certain things, but we're continuing to put things on workshops to deal with. But when we're talking about the EDC, that's something that, whether it's an A or B, has to go to the voters. The question is whether we're going to put that on the ballot and move forward. But I haven't heard anything aside from I haven't heard anything in addition to what tax abatements that they're offering, other than the ability to give cash or some type of incentives that way. So what I would like to hear is if there are other incentives that go along with having an EDC, then we can hear that and we can put that to the voters. That's not something we have to continue to meet about, talk about. If that's something we want to do, then we could just do that. But aside from, the only thing I understand at this point, you keep mentioning that we need to offer some things other cities are offering. I'm hoping I can find out what else is it that other cities are offering that we don't offer aside from or outside of the EDCs. Do you
Basically, that's what I'm saying. What almost every city besides us has transferred to is EDC. Okay. We are like one of the only cities that currently do not operate with an EDC.
And that's because the voters turned it down. So you're just saying we need to get it before the voters again.
Yes, sir.
Okay. We'll just get it. We could
Do
just
you
get
think
it
we
before
need
the
a
voters
workshop
again.
to make a decision as to whether we're going to try to get this to the voters or what? Is that what?
You'd have to come up.
I was about to say, you need someone to explain the two types to you, because a type A is more restrictive than the B. And if I'm not mistaken, Port Arthur is a B.
Port Arthur's been an A. They just recently switched to the B.
Okay, because
Yeah.
B gives you more flexibility in terms of, you know, the enticements that you can bring in terms of, you know, the types of facilities that will come. A is more restrictive than a B. So you need somebody to come in and tell you what the differences are and what the pros and the cons are.
And that would come up, would that only be in our municipal elections? So that would be in '23?
We could
You
invite
could do
someone
a
from
special election,
TML.
but I don't know
Yeah,
that you'd want to
but
do
first
that.
you need to determine, number one, what portion of your sales tax is gonna be dedicated for this purpose. Because you need to know going in, how much money you're taking out of the general fund, and how you're gonna make that different, how do you make it up?
So when would that, if we were looking at going to an EDC and making a decision which type we were gonna do, first, what would be the soonest time that would be opportunity to take it to the people?
Well, if you took it with a normal election, you'd put it on the ballot in May of 2023.
Okay,
And a November election.
May of
Other than
2020.
that, you're gonna have to have a special, basically, election.
And so that would be November of '22. So with that, this workshop would be prudent to be sometimes before November of '22, not something that would need to go on immediately. Okay.
Mayor,
Councilmember
now, one
Gay.
thing we also need to be aware of is that creation of an EDC creates another level of administrative staff. You have to have someone who is salaried as the director of the EDC, and they require staff, and they require a physical presence somewhere with a there's overhead is what I'm getting to invest in an EDC. So all that money that you derive from your percentage of sales tax does not necessarily make itself available for improvement. You've got to set aside some of that for overhead, and we need to understand that clearly too.
A good portion of it will go to staff.
Not
Councilmember Neal?
Yeah, not if you look at, like, I'll give you an example. I think it'll be best for us to, like we said, bring somebody in and get to the meat and potatoes of what it would really look like. Even with a half cents, I know we do not have to do a half cents. We as a council can decide whatever amount we want to do. You can go up or you can go down, and definitely I don't think we need a half cents in Beaumont.
Councilmember Neal?
Thank you, Mayor. I think an EDC can be a real slippery slope if it's not done properly on the front end. The city manager mentioned something earlier about the Chamber of Commerce being what is one of the entities that we pay that's charged with helping us out with economic development. And before we start going down this road, wouldn't it be worthwhile for maybe us to meet with the Chamber of Commerce and seeing maybe what we could do to better help those guys do more for us? I don't know if it's maybe more money the city of Beaumont could offer for the chamber every year than what we're paying on top of the $85,000, but it seems like maybe we got to take advantages of the resources we already have here before we start looking at something new.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, we're going to move to youth engagement. And objectives for youth engagement is citywide internship program for 2022, park workshop, also the City of Beaumont Youth Council second semester until summer of 2022. And the fourth objective is sports complex upgrades. So the first thing we need to do to upgrade our parks is to identify our top 10 parks and agree to doing a workshop so that we could see which parks need to be upgraded. And I guess we would probably have to determine the top 10 parks before we could even discuss the upgrade. So, every ward pretty much have a park in their ward. I think Councilmember Neal is the only council that you only have one park in your ward, right?
No, there's several parks in Ward 1. There's no community buildings in Ward
No
1.
community building, okay. So with that, Councilmember Turner, where do you want to start with identifying, what criteria are we going to use to identify our top 10 parks?
Me personally, I think the best thing to do is we have different wards. We know wards 3 and wards 4 clearly have more parks than wards 1 and ward 2. I would ask the ward council members to tell us what they feel are their top parks in their ward, and we just will identify them. We won't get into what we want to do and how much we want to do. We just want to simply identify them today to let staff and get a better understanding later on in the future what parks we'll actually get into as far as what we're looking to do as far as improvements. But just today, we just want to identify what we feel like are the top parks in the wards.
Okay, Councilmember Getz.
As far as Ward 2 is concerned, is Rogers Park, which is probably one of the most heavily used parks in the city. The Municipal Athletic Complex, which isn't technically a park, but is still under the Parks Department, and then Pearlstein Park.
Chris?
Terrell Park. Sprott Park. Central Park.
One more, Chris.
Alice Keith.
Mr. Neal?
I have to rely on Jimmy to help me on this, but I was thinking Wuthering Heights and probably Klein Park would be the two most utilized in Ward 1. Reed, yeah.
Mr. Samuel?
Magnolia, Jimmy, Magnolia, I have a lot of parks. Collier's Ferry, Magnolia Park, Charlton Pollard Park, those are the larger ones. Riverfront is dead. I mean, yeah.
Yes, but you can't put Riverfront because that'll be in your ward.
Yeah, Riverfront. Huh? Yeah, and is Babe Saharius considered? That's Babe Saharius. That's. And those are the largest ones, Jimmy? I think that covers it. There's a lot more, but. There's a lot more. Yeah.
And I think the toughest thing is identifying the main ones, but just kind of I think the best people who would know is the people who are over the ward. So right now, I just kind of want to identify the parks, and we've been talking about a park workshop later on. So now at least staff knows, because when I met with Kyle and Jimmy, and they were like, at least can we know what parks do the council feel like are the main parks before we even make the next step as far as park improvements to possibly get it in the budget at a later date. So I think now just kind of identify them. Go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things I've heard pretty much we need to make sure we have restrooms at the major parks. And I don't think there's a restroom at Pine Park. I've had a lot of people talk about that. But so when we talk about improvements, I'm not certain what we're talking about as far as improvements, because what's improvements to some parks, some of the other parks that are heavily used don't even have access to. So we just need to get an idea of how we're gonna evaluate the overall park system. So that's where I'd like to have some discussion about.
Well,
So to be clear, before we get into this, we discussing the overall value of the parks, not necessarily what we want to put there. We just want to talk about the overall quality. Example, you might have a restroom at, we know one not at Magnolia, but I'm gonna use Magnolia as an example. A restroom at Magnolia Park. We want to make sure we got a restroom at Sprout Park before we start talking about improvements, to make sure the basic necessities are there first, so they're kind of equal before we get to picking how we're going to improve them. Am I following you correct there?
Yes.
Okay, I agree.
Okay, one of the things with public restrooms in parks, it's keeping, yeah, let me get it out. Keeping homeless people from occupying it, sleeping in it, and
trashing it.
well, just really taking over the restrooms. I know that the restrooms are closed at the end of the day. They're locked at the end of the day, so that they're not slept in overnight. But then, how do you control it during the day?
Well, we have staff going through there emptying trash cans and checking on restrooms, putting new, changing out the toilet paper, making sure there's, everything's functioning properly. But so what the city's done, again, just history, not that it's right or wrong. So the thinking for decades and decades was you don't need restrooms in neighborhood parks. Every park is classified as could be a pocket park, neighborhood park, community park. And so the neighborhood parks were never designed to have restrooms. Right. It was for people to walk, ride their bike, go down to the park within their neighborhood, no restrooms. Community parks have restrooms. So restrooms now, believe it or not, for men and women, you're talking a couple $100,000 just for a restroom. $200 to $300 at least, right, Keith? So we know what they cost. So very expensive. So if you want to add restrooms, you need to think through at what type of parks. Let's say it's $250,000, $300,000 for a restroom. Then you have to have the staff to maintain them. I mean, there's rough stuff going on in some parks that you may not even be aware of. I know Councilman Samuel is, just because of our history. I mean, you go in there and people get up on the sinks and jump up and down. You come in the next morning and the sink's torn out of the wall and the mirrors are shattered, and that's why we have the tight mirrors and restrooms and so forth that we do. They're not sometimes attractive, but you're trying to limit the damage. So we do lock those restrooms up every night. We have to. So yeah, you can add additional restrooms, but you're talking about, I mean, okay, if you went and built 3 new restrooms, you're talking $1 million plus just on 3 new restrooms, and then you have to have the staff to clean them every day and service them. You need to service them 7 days a week, because no one wants to walk in a restroom with their children and it's a total mess, and then you get the phone call, or they call 311 and call our office. No one wants that. So, but it takes people to go out there 7 days a week and do it properly. So you have to think about these things in advance before. It's easy to say, yeah, let's go build 5 new restrooms. Well, you're talking $1.5 million probably.
Mayor,
Councilmember Getz?
Jimmy, out of these parks that have listed up there, how many of them, or which ones don't have restroom? I don't think Pearl Sting Park has a restroom, but other than that, which other parks don't have restrooms that are on that board?
Not many. I
Is
think
Pearl
they all
Sting-
do. I'm trying to think about Ida Reed.
Does not, Ida Reed does not have a restroom. Well, it's got restrooms for the dogs, cause they just go outside.
Wuthering Heights does not.
It's not on the board.
Oh, okay, did make
He
it cut.
decided not to write that one when you called it. So, the other ones do. The other ones are, they're community parks, as the city manager said. So that's the difference really between those types of parks.
Is Pearl Sting considered a community
It's a
or?
neighborhood.
I thought it was a neighborhood.
Yes, ma'am.
And
So we
I'm-
wouldn't
I'm-
put a restroom there anyway?
And I'm not advocating for one
Not by
there.
definition, no ma'am.
Okay.
It does come up. The question does come to me occasionally. Pearlstein and recently Pine Street, they've come to us. But again, you know, you look at the cost, and then by definition, it's a neighborhood park. So it's not something that we typically do.
What's the classifications of parks? What's the smallest park?
By definition, like type or
Yeah,
the
type.
actual smallest?
Type.
It just depends. They're not necessarily sized.
Not the neighborhood parks are not the smallest.
Well, we used to have pocket parks.
Okay.
We called them something else, Tyrone, before.
Yeah, there's an urban park. Our definitions are urban or our
Neighborhood,
names.
community.
Neighborhood, community, urban, and there's one other. It's like a special event type of park, which is what, like
The event
athletic
center?
complex, for example. It's event center's not a park.
Well,
So,
the
so,
courtyard up front that's not even considered a park.
No, ma'am.
so parks like Gusman Park, Fletcher Park, Caldwood Park, which are very small. What
Neighborhood.
are those called?
Those are
Neighborhood
neighborhood
parks?
parks. Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay.
What about porta potties? Have y'all tried those before?
We've put those out at both of the hiking bikes. That was something that came up quite often, and you know, if people are out there on a couple mile run or whatever, we've given them that option, and we pay for those. But we haven't put those at other locations.
Are they knocked over or vandalized? Or?
I expected they would be, Mayor, but they haven't been.
Would DD6 allow us to build permanent facilities on those?
I don't know. I mean, they've been pretty amenable anytime we've tried to work with them on anything, but it's not something that we've asked.
Okay.
So is the plan to have a work session in December to talk about what kind of upgrades and amenities we want at these parks? Is that what we're looking
Yeah,
at?
I think first the plan was to identify them, and then we're gonna come back and do a work session on what we would like to see there. That's why, like today, you know, we still got a few more things I didn't want to get into the what's, but at least at minimum, let's identify what we as the council feel like are our top 10 parks.
Okay, so we have all 10 identified. As a matter of fact, I think you have 11.
Because it's kind of unfortunate. Chris and Aldwin really have so many parks in their ward. So Ward 1 and 2 had 2 parks we listed on there, and Wards 3 and 4 actually had 3, just for the simple fact it's just way more parks. And I think all council can agree it's way more parks in Wards 3 and 4 than Wards 1 and 2.
Ward 3 is a lot larger than most of the other wards.
Yes.
Ward 4 is pretty big too, and not unfortunate. It's a good thing we got all those parks.
Yes, Chris got 4. He got 4 on there, but I want Chris to take some time out to probably pick 3, just for starters.
I had to pick all 4 of those, man. I could add a couple more to it. If you like.
Liberia,
Liberia, that's the park I grew up in.
but it's a neighborhood park.
It's a neighborhood park. That's where all those pro football players used to practice at in the summer.
They
At
came from Liberia Park.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
They came from Liberia Park, the only park that they even had in Ward 4 at the time.
I have a question, quick question. we keep bringing up having other workshops. Some of the things that we discuss at workshops, can they be discussed and taken care of as discussion items on the regular agenda?
Yes, so work session, we changed it to discussion items because some people didn't know what a work session is, so it's the same thing.
So it could take place at the end of the regular meeting as a discussion item instead of having to have a special day of workshops for a specific subject.
This is a rare. We don't normally have set-aside workshops.
And I'm trying to move us along because right now we are on the 11 a.m. agenda, and it is now it is now 2:18.
So I think we good there, Mayor. I think we can go on and move forward. I think Jimmy and Kyle got an understanding of what parks we kind of want to focus on first. So we
Okay.
good.
We're gonna talk about the complex upgrades at all that's on here
In the work section.
under objective number 4 under youth
Sports
engagement.
complex?
Yes.
I guess we can. You have a comment
It's
on
just
it?
this one thing I've been bringing up. I spoke to Kyle about it and Dean out there at the softball field. They're having to cancel a lot of tournaments because of the weather, and I've been approached more than once and told that if they could get some of those fields with astroturf on it, that they wouldn't have to wait as long to play on it after it rained. And these tournaments bring a lot of money into Beaumont. We've been told by Mr. Morgan out at the Ford Park fields that if we had 3 turf fields on College Street, he could bring an additional 24 teams in to play. And also, and even the softball tournaments, those folks come in, they fly here, they get hotels here, they rent cars, they buy money, they pay into that hot tax, and then the tournament get canceled. So they flew down here, which they spent all that money, but they didn't get to do what they came down here for. And they looked into turfing those fields, and they didn't get a really good bid on it. And I spoke to Kyle a couple times about it. Just want to see if we got any update on that to where we can get that taken care of sooner rather than later. By I think most of the tournaments take place in the summertime. I don't know if that could be done by then, but it would keep the city from losing some money because those places they make money. Those tournaments make money for the city. And if not, if Port Arthur or Lake Charles start turfing their fields, then we'll start losing those tournaments to them.
Chris, when we first got on the council, I got a report from CVB, and it was stated that birding and baseball was some of our main tourism attractions that actually get people to Beaumont. So I actually agree with you 100%, especially with it bringing in revenue like it does bring in.
That's it for you, Chris?
Yeah, I'll try to answer his question. So the Convention Visitors Bureau, the hotel occupancy tax, in their budget, they did budget for maybe participating or a collaborative effort with someone possibly to turf 3 of the 12 fields at the athletic complex. But it wasn't near enough money to really do anything. So it didn't go anywhere. And so Keith Folsom over facilities is working with Jimmy Neal they're reaching out to groups to give us a good estimate on what it would take to turf a field, so we can come back and tell you, hey, to do 3 fields, estimated X amount. It's not budgeted for anywhere. I think it's going to be probably too expensive to take out the hotel occupancy tax fund. There's higher priorities in that fund, especially with this new visitor center coming online, visitors and birding center. So we're trying to. They're working on it right now, trying to come up with a good estimate. And it would be nice. It's just a matter of how do you pay for it. Just remember, and the public's watching this, that we just borrowed $33 million. We just received it. So you're probably not in a position to go borrow any. I mean, yes, you could go borrow more money, but you're gonna have to increase the tax rate to do it, to service that debt. That's a fact. So, we're probably not planning to borrow any money for a couple of years. So just keep that in mind. You can do some things, maybe one project here, one project there with cash. You need to be careful doing it. That needs to be a high priority, probably of the council. So when we come back, we'll just give you a ballpark number without going out for bids, what it would cost to turf 3 fields. Again, be nice, but you would need to decide what priority level.
Thank you. Councilmember Getz.
In terms of sports complex upgrades at the municipal athletic complex, I'd like for us to put for consideration, I know can't fund it right now, but for consideration, the construction of a racquetball/handball court, because I believe we're the largest city in Texas that does not have a public racquetball and handball court. The only place you can play in Beaumont now that I'm aware of is at the Health and Wellness Center or at Lamar University. And so there's room to construct one within the perimeter of the tennis athletic complex. We wouldn't have to put bathrooms in it because people could use the existing bathrooms in the pro shop. People could check in through the pro shop. I would expect that there would be a fee associated with playing on the racquetball handball courts, just like there is on the tennis courts. But I would really like to see us put in the budget for consideration the construction of something like that. The other thing at the sports complex, when we upgraded our tennis complex, we built a viewing stand for half of it, and we looked to the future to complete the viewing stand on the other half of it, and we poured the foundations for it in such a way that we could come back later. I'd like for us to put for consideration, not paying for it now, but for consideration completing that viewing stand for the other half of the tennis courts. We've got to keep in mind that we're going to have tournaments come in here from the Western Athletic Conference, and they all want to be able to look at the competition as it's going. So that would be a nice addition and would complete out the tennis complex.
Chris, that new bill that I kind of mentioned earlier, where you can actually apply 2 cents to a hotel tax that wouldn't fall on the hotels. It would actually fall on the people who actually rent the hotels, but you only can utilize that money for certain things, such as maybe a water park, a convention center, a sports complex. Is that possible, that possible upgrades to the sports complex could fall under that, or we got to look into it more?
So my understanding of that, and it's pretty limited, but it's in the Texas Tax Code. I think it's Chapter 321. And first of all, you got to get a representative to sponsor a bill. And then once the bill is passed, you got to take it to the voters for approval. And then after you get voter approval, that's when you can raise the hotel tax 2%. I believe the county can do the same. After that, it's used for, like you said, entertainment venues or sporting complexes. And in the sense of the word sporting complex, it's where you're selling tickets for admission. So I don't think it would work for our sport complex.
Thank you.
Okay, so any other questions on youth engagement? Okay, we're going to move to infrastructure. Infrastructure plan. First objective is to develop a direction flushing plan and create a timeline for the completion. Number 2 is to establish a pipe bursting plan for targeted areas. Objective number 3 is to identify the direction we want to go for a street rehabilitation. And then objective number 4 is to establish a directional drilling plan for water line replacement. the first objective of developing a direction for a flushing plan and creating a timeline for the completion. Mr. Manager, could you just give us some direction on the development of the?
I don't know where this is coming from. This is placed on the agenda by Councilmember Turner, so I don't have any idea. Meaning, Mike Harris has explained this 3 or 4 times, so he can come forward and tell you what he does as it relates to directional drilling. He can tell you what he does with direction flushing, which he's already done 3 or 4 times, but I don't know why this is placed on him.
Well, Mayor,
Councilmember Getz?
okay, so we hired a firm, Corona Consulting, and they were supposed to, I think, look at our overall water infrastructure, and I think a component of that was directional flushing. Maybe you could update us with where we're at on that, and are they going to be coming to us with some recommendations or reports? Where are we on that?
Well, they were gathering all the information as of 10 days ago. Do you have an update, Doug?
Yeah, they've got an on-site with us. I think it's December 1st, 2nd. They'll be in town. We've been doing the data gathering and analysis on their part. And then I think we're on track for, I'll double check and email this to y'all. I thought I had provided an update here a while back, but I think we were on track for like a February report where they'd come back. So we're on track with that process. We knew it would take, I think at the time we said 3 to 5 months, and so we're pretty much on target with what we expected. And that may include directional flushing. I mean, we don't know what the recommendations are at this time. We'll see. I would expect it would, because that's pretty common. But
And the reason it was placed on the agenda, yeah, we discussed it with Mike and we appreciate it. We just wanted to kind of get an update as far as, are we getting closer to, are we gaining some ground on a directional flushing plan? I know he put some out on the internet, which we appreciated, but I just kind of want to see where are we at now, and are we getting a little closer to actually establishing a set schedule and the whole directional flushing and some of the other things that's going on. I just like to be able to answer people properly, like I'm sure everybody else up here, when citizens ask us kind of what's going on, where we at, what's going on with Corona, the whole nine. I just want to be able to update them to the best of our ability, and I think right now is a good time to just see where we at, because we discussed it a few months ago. I just want to see where we at and where we can let the community know as well.
So, Mr. Harris, yes, could you come and give us an update on where we are?
While he's coming up, I'll mention as well, we had a valve contract with a vendor that they were supposed to come in and test and exercise valves throughout the city. And early on in COVID, they were doing so. And of course, when you have valves that haven't been opened and shut in quite a while, you stir up sediments when you open and shut those valves. And so we had quite a bit of discolored water calls, and we suspended that valve program at the time. We're going to have to reinitiate that and get that going again, because part of Mike's issue with directional flushing is you can't directional flush unless you have valves in place to create what's in essence a dead end on something that's not normally a dead end, so that you can blow those sediments through the line and out. That's the whole purpose of the directional flushing. So we'll have to get on that and get through that valve part for him to be able to really implement the directional flushing.
Right. And as you said, as far as the directional flushing plan, let me start, and like I said, I'll be very brief with it. Let me start by saying there's 3 types of flushing that we do, okay? The first one is dead end flushing. That's the one we're mandated by the state to do. Every dead end line in Beaumont, we have a flush out on. We go out once a month, we flush these dead end lines. The purpose of flushing the dead end lines, of course, is to get the new water in, water ages that sits in these lines. We open it up, we flush it out, we get new water in. So like I said, and the reason I'm going over this, so we're not confused with what flushing we're talking about, okay? That's dead end flushing that's mandated. We do it every month. We have areas we go through every month. It's turned into the state, and so on and so forth. The other flushing that we do is what we call weekly routine flushing, okay? Weekly routine flushing, we have points throughout the city. Like I said, I had kind of brought this up before. I think we have about 60 locations that's throughout the city, north end, west end, south end, Terrell Park area, Amelia area, that we have a crew that goes every day, and he starts at one section, and he goes around and they flush every one of these points throughout the city. And once he completes his loop going throughout the city, he starts right back at the top and goes over again. So that's what we call our monthly routine flushing. Like I said, it's just a routine we do every month. Now, directional flushing and what you're trying to accomplish with directional flushing, one of the things that we have spoke about, and we've come to the council several times, talking about the iron and the manganese that's in the water, that's in the pipes. Directional flushing, what you're trying to accomplish, you want to create a dead-end main. In other words, all the water mains are looped, majority of them. That's not at a dead-end flush out. They're looped. So you want to dead-end this main where you can open a hydrant, open a flush out at the end of it at a maximum pressure to where it'll blow or strip out all the iron and all the manganese out of that main and blow it out the end. Basically clean the main on the inside. When we're talking about developing this directional flushing plan, we identified areas where there were problem spots, okay? Blarney areas, problem spots. So we developed a plan to go and start these areas, isolating sections of main and flushing. Since then, we've got lobe well back in place. It's been going. We've had Corona consultants. They're looking into the iron and manganese. They're looking into the areas, what's causing it. So we haven't implemented the plan yet. We have the plan in place, but we haven't implemented it yet. We're wanting to see what this Corona consultants comes up with. They may come in and say, hey, the problem is it's a treatment problem. Y'all change this and this in treatment, you're not gonna have an issue. So like I said, once we get the results back from Corona, we can make a better decision on when to start the directional flushing. Like I said, the directional flushing is kind of a specialized flushing, just for getting rid of the iron and the manganese.
And I was able to find the email. We are are targeting for the end of February to have the report from Corona by the end of February.
Any other question?
Okay, can you answer any pipe bursting questions?
The pipe bursting, yes, ma'am. We, every year we spend, I think, millions of dollars, doing the, cleaning and televising the sewer mains. And what we do there, we identify the problem areas, the older pipe, the concrete pipe, the pipe that has the issues as far as letting infiltration in. So then we have an in-house crew that does pipe bursting as well as we contract out pipe bursting. So, I mean, we have contracts set up every year to tackle these areas to replace these sewer mains.
I think we ran roughly 5-6 million last year in pipe bursting, and we should be somewhere roughly on target with that this year. And like Mike was saying, targeting the areas that seem to have the worst problems with infiltration.
And kind of to go along with objective 3 about the street rehabilitation, we do work with the street department on areas that we know that's coming up for street rehabilitation. We do put our in-house pipe bursting crews on these areas to go ahead and get the lines changed before the street rehab starts, so we're not tearing the street up right after they come through and change it. So like I said, we do try to stay ahead of the street department on that part. And
Plan for the water line?
the directional drilling, it's been, we haven't really had a contractor or contract in place for directional drilling in quite some time. We're looking at trying to get that in place. One of the things about directional drilling, we use that for water line replacement. It's less interruption to the customer, less interruption to the area. There's not a lot of digging. Everything's drilled underground, pipes pulled in. The old line stays in service the entire time we're installing the new line, all the way up to the point where we move the service line from the old line to the new line. And then we come back and we abandon it. So we're looking at trying to get it implemented with some contract to do directional drilling. We do directional drilling in-house. We have a crew. I think we have actually 3 drilling machines. It's a slow-going process. It's a very specialized process, the directional drilling. So, I mean, it takes some time to get people trained properly to do it. So, you know, in-house crews are a little bit slower than what a contractor would be, but like I said, we do have it in place.
Are there any plans to contract a portion of it out, or it's gonna all be in-house?
No,
No,
ma'am, that's
we
what we're looking at.
contract most of it out. You were
The
over
directional
the,
drilling.
you were over the
I was over
directional drilling program for the city. So I think some of this, we've been in a lawsuit with an ex-employee for 5+ years, and he posts a lot of stuff on social media that I know some of you look at, and people don't even know what these topics are. So that's why they're being discussed today, because he talks about them on social media and what he would do. But I would encourage you not to look at that. It's not accurate. Mike Harris was over the directional drilling program. If he felt like he had the staff right now to do it, we'd be doing it. But we're contracting out most of the new water main lines, and we contract out a lot of the big pipe bursting work, and we're spending millions and millions on pipe bursting. The council's been very supportive of that effort. We're spending by far more than we ever have on infrastructure, upgrading the water and sewer infrastructure. So
Mayor, one of the things, it's not listed on one of the objectives, but during heavy rainfalls, we always have sanitary sewers that overflow. Can you talk about where we're at on our sanitary sewer overflow initiative and what we're doing to, pipe bursting is part of that, of course, but
Sure.
where are we on that?
Well, and that goes right along with what you're talking about with the pipe bursting. You know, with the camera and the televising of the sewer mains. Whenever we get the heavy rains, that's where we get the infiltration of the rainwater in the sewer lines. And it basically fills the sewer lines up. And when you start getting backups, basically what's happened, it goes to the lift station. The pumps can't pull it out of the lift station faster than what the water's running in. We do all kind of stuff. We got flow monitors. We put flow monitors out in different basins to identify where the areas of heavy flow's coming from. Like I said, we have our camera, our televising, our cleaning lines. We're looking for areas of infiltration. We do manhole rehab. Manhole rehab's another issue where you have a lot of infiltration coming in the older brick manholes. So we do a lot of that in-house. We're just starting a manhole contract coming up to help close the manhole rehab out for this year. Like I said, we do all kinds of stuff. One of the things, I'm kind of happy to say, in the last probably month, we found a major infiltration spot on Florida Avenue that's currently being repaired. We found another major one on the DD6 ditch right there off of Brighton. Contractor should be moving in on that to get it started, get it opened up, see where the problem is. The thing that I tell the citizens when I speak to them is any spot that we find infiltration, we're able to get it closed up, that's less rainwater getting in the system, and it's going to do nothing but help. So.
Councilmember Gates?
Yeah, one more thing. It's not listed as an objective, but it's under infrastructure, and it's not a Mike Harris question, but fluoride in our water supply. I'd like for council to take a look at that. Today might not be the time to have an in-depth conversation about it, but you can drink this water and there's no fluoride in it. But if you can't afford bottled water and you have to drink out of the tap, you're going to have fluoride in your water. Now, when fluoride was first put in municipal water supplies in the 50s, a lot of dentists were behind it because it's been shown to help prevent cavities in children. But since that time, toothpaste and mouthwash contains fluoride in it, and you have adequate sources of getting your fluoride. Fluoride's nasty stuff. It's a very caustic chemical. I've talked to you about it, Mike. Your workers have to work with it. We just, maybe some of y'all don't know this, but we just finished repairs, $500,000 worth of repairs on a 72-inch line that was damaged because of fluoride being injected into it at that site. I've asked some dentists to talk about it and give a report to me as to whether or not they feel it's necessary or essential to continue to have fluoride in our water supply. But it's expensive. The chemicals are expensive. And a lot of cities have gone away from putting fluoride in their water. And I would like to have a conversation about that and whether or not it would be in the best interest of our citizens to do the same.
Well, Mr. Harris, can you speak to the damage
As far as the fluoride,
as far as the fluoride?
the fluoride's more of a production. They do at the production plant. They do add the fluoride to it, to the water under safe levels. Yeah, as Councilman Magette said, it's pretty caustic. It does cause issues with the metals and such as that at the plant. Now, like I said, he asked, Councilman Magette asked me one time about fluoride. And I told him, I said, I said, as far as, I don't have the numbers, that would have to be researched. I said, just in my opinion, I said, and this is just strictly my opinion, that the cost of the fluoride and the cost of what it takes to treat the water with fluoride probably does not, it outweighs the benefits of what we get from the fluoride,
Yeah.
I just,
In other words, it's so diluted
Right.
that it's probably not offering the health benefit or protections that you would think for children. If you want to have fluoride, you're first of all, you're not supposed to swallow it. It's poisonous. You're not supposed to swallow. You're supposed to spit it out. So toothpaste and mouthwash, you can put it on your teeth when you're brushing your teeth or when you're rinsing your mouth, and get your fluoride on your enamel that way. But to try to think that you're getting health benefit from fluoride from drinking the water, it's not helping your teeth, but it's going into your body, and I'm not sure that that's something
right.
that we
And,
want.
and like I said, and Mayor, that's just, like I said, just my opinion on it. Someone from the production plant that actually treats the water could probably offer.
And
more.
we're working on putting some information
Yeah.
together. If you give us some time, we could probably have a work session during council one time and discuss the history of how we got to adding fluoride to the water. And it's totally within council's decision as to whether we add it on Pine or not. It really doesn't cost us that much in chemicals. I think it's about maybe $700 a month or maybe less than that. The chemicals aren't the problem. The problem is that the stuff's so caustic that the damages it causes to the plant, if you have a leak or if you have gas in the line like we did on that 72, those costs far outweigh any of the actual costs of getting the chemical in. But the background to it is that council in the past voted against adding fluoride to the water, but what came to light, I believe it was in the early 80s, was that there's natural fluoride in the water at Loeb. And so the contrast between the water at Loeb and the water at Pine led to the decision by council at the time to add fluoride to the water at Pine so that there'd be fluoride in all the water in the system. So it was initially voted against, and then council voted to add it at that time. So.
And it's just never been readdressed again.
I think it was addressed briefly when Dr. Coleman was on council, if I'm not mistaken, and there were a number of dentists that came, and then the subject got dropped. We weren't feeding fluoride for a number of years due to the problem with the 72-inch line. A bypass had to be built, and then we had to fix the 72-inch line, and then we recently started feeding it again. The mechanics of turning it off, the state requires us to give 60 days notice to TCEQ and 60 days notice to the citizens prior to turning it off. But that's the only requirement if we would decide to do so.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Well, with this, I would like to know, can we get something clinically as to the impact of the fluoride, so that we can make a decision as a council
Yeah,
on the direction we should go.
Mayor Pro Tem, there's experts on, they say they're experts on both sides, right? And there's a lot of opinions out there, so we could probably invite someone to give you both perspectives. And then, if the council wanted to take, where we didn't
That'll confuse.
put
probably confuse.
fluoride in the water, we talk amongst ourselves about that quite a bit. And it's a council decision, so if you're wanting us to do that, we can go try to find two folks to come in here and just tell you what they think and provide data and facts according to them, and then you can make a decision. But it's a policy decision. It's a council decision. And it's not easy because there's information all over the board.
I understand, but with that, I think I prefer to hear the pros and cons to make a decision, particularly since this is a decision that will impact all the citizens here.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand that if it is caustic enough to impact metal pipes. So I'd be interested in finding out, hearing both sides.
Okay.
If they're both qualified and, I guess anybody can be qualified. I'd just like to get both sides.
I'll ask Bart is over the water plant, so I'll ask him to see if you can find someone on both sides.
And maybe we can get some input from our health director also.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Okay, number 4 objective is street rehabilitation.
I think we kind of hit it with him just now.
Yeah, I think we did.
Okay. So we're going to go to major events. We're going to do a workshop. I think we're running out of the year, so it's something we're probably going to have to move. Yeah, we're running out of time for workshops. So major events would be Veterans Day Parade, Juneteenth Upgrade, Multicultural Festival, 4th of July, Mardi Gras, Hispanic Independence Day, Olympics, and Cajun Creole Festival. Those are some of the old and new events that we have in our city that we would either like to upgrade or make some changes to. And probably first quarter of 2022, we could look at doing a workshop on these, get the input from citizens to see what type of things you would like to see in the city on these different topics. Councilmember Getz.
I'd like to add Oktoberfest to that list, and the types of upgrades we can do for Oktoberfest as well. It's one of our more popular events.
Okay, and add Oktoberfest. Any other discussion? Just think, Tyrone. We're almost at the end. We have one last subject left. Riverfront Development. So our last is Riverfront Development, which we have 3 objectives. One is the Battleship Texas. We've already done that presentation. So we're just going to look at an overall master plan of hiring a firm, or either just see how we would like to move forward and what the public would like to see. Mr. Manager, could you just give us where we stand right now on Riverfront Development?
Okay, so we're working to stabilize the shoreline of Riverfront Park, and we're waiting on the Corps of Engineer to sign off on that. And so we're just at a standstill. And, has anything changed, Bart?
Nothing's really changed. We were hoping to get approval by the end of this year. We don't have anything definitive that says we would do so, but if we did, and we could put it out for bid in February, then that'd put construction mid to end of March and a completion date around May of 2023. But this all depends on the
Yes,
Corps.
I wouldn't pay attention to
doing the
any
permit.
of those dates because
Yeah, so that just gives you a timeline after they would give us approval. So we're waiting for them to approve. That's the last step for the Corps to approve the permit, and then we can put it out for bid.
Councilmember Getz?
So when you talk about waiting for the Army Corps of Engineers, as I understand it, there's more than one department of the Corps of Engineers. There's the regulatory department, there's the department that talks about structures, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we started with a plan and then we changed it a little bit and made some, we changed it, and that caused it to be reset, or?
We didn't change it. What they wanted us to do, when we submitted to the Corps the first time, they stated that they were okay with it, but they wanted us to designate where the debris was in the river from Harvey that we were proposing to leave embedded in the bottom of the river. So we did so, and we resubmitted the plan to the Corps. Well, when we did that, they kicked off this whole 408 review process, and then that's brought us to where we're at today. So it was their request for us to designate where that debris was that caused us to resubmit. So that's just kind of part of the back and forth once you start into the conversations with them on, we need to see this, and then you send it to them, and then you head on to the next step.
But a 408 review process, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's to give the public and interested parties the opportunity to comment on whatever they want to comment on with regard to that aspect of the plan. Typically lasts 30 days or so. Where are we on the 408 process?
There's no exact time frame for any of this with respect to the Corps. You just enter the process and you go back and forth with their people until they're satisfied and they issue the permit. So they're under no explicit, they have to give you something in 30 days or 60 days or 90 days.
Okay.
We're just, dependent upon their mercy to get finished.
All right.
Councilmember Turner?
While we're waiting on the Corps, is it okay that the council or Mr. Manager looks at maybe a firm to start working on the overall master plan of what we want to do with
Okay,
the
so
whole area?
So the city council voted 6-1 to buy the property at 555 Main Street, our favorite subject. So I'll read the capital program to you. The land is approximately 3.7 acres and will allow for the city to develop the site, which may include expanding Riverfront Park and/or providing public spaces. The existing building will be demolished, the parking lot will be removed, and the site will be improved to allow for green spaces and various public amenities. The city council will decide the priorities and the next steps regarding what amenities and improvements are constructed. So Keith Folsom and his staff have developed the specs for the asbestos abatement, which When we get those back, we come to the council and you approve the contract. Then we're gonna do the same thing for the demolition of the building. So normally, and I'm going back to the event center, how was that built? That was approved by the council, of course. Took us a couple years to buy the property, clean up the property. We bought it from 30-plus owners. But that was driven by staff. That was driven by the department directors with me sitting down. What did we want to see on the site? You know, we spent hours and hours over many days putting that plan together, took it to the city council blessed it. That's how we did it. And then you reach out to architects, you reach out to other groups as needed to help put together that plan. The council wasn't involved at all, besides approving it. So, what I'm trying to tell you is you can do it that way, or the council can say, all right, let's go hire some outside firm to work with the council and come up with a master plan, which is, I think, is what you'd like to do, which is fine. You can definitely do it that way. So you just have to determine, number one, does the council want to do that? What's the criteria going to be? Are you going to put together a RFP, a request for proposal, and go out and choose that firm? I mean, I don't think you're at that point yet because you haven't even cleaned up the site. So what I would encourage you to do or advise you to do over the next 3-6 months, whatever, is have an offsite. You could have an offsite work session just on this topic for quite some time. You need to determine what does the council want to see constructed on that site. And then I know our staff is more than capable of doing that, and they would bring in people as needed. But if that's not the direction you wanted to go, hire some outside group. You're gonna have to pay for it, and they would come up with the master plan that you would sign off on. Works either way. You can do it either way, but you're gonna first have to determine what do you want to see on the site. And I'm gonna state what you said upstairs on a whiteboard many months ago, because I don't want anyone to go out and say it's just gonna be grass, which has been thrown out there for 6 months. No, what y'all talked about upstairs is a possible outside pavilion, AstroTurf area, playground equipment for different age groups, geared towards different age groups, lighting, sidewalks, restrooms. Those are the amenities that y'all have talked about collectively upstairs. So it's a matter of defining that plan, and then whether it's some outside group or our staff who does this all the time, they would take that proposed list of amenities and cost them out, give you ballpark numbers, and then the council would say, yes, we want A, B, and C, and J, K, and H, and whatever, and then you sign off on it and go out for bids, and that's how we do it. So the council is going to have to make a determination at some point. Do you want staff to do this, or do you want an outside group to come in and lead y'all and have some master plan that you're going to have to pay for? So.
Councilmember Getz.
I think the reason why a lot of people in the community think that there is no plan right now, but putting grass out there is because there is no plan right now. There's talk about the possibilities of what can be there, which you just alluded to. But there is no plan right now. The plan right now doesn't exist. And I think that's what Councilmember Turner has put this on there for, is do we want to start talking about the creation of a plan, and what do we want? we know at some point in time the building's going to be down and there's going to be nothing there but earth. So with that being a given, then, you know, I don't know why we need to wait. I would also like to talk about a request for proposals for what was identified as being the development site, because all of this really kind of goes back to wanting to develop the riverfront. And in terms of development of the riverfront, it's been mentioned countless times that we'd like to see something like the wheelhouse and Port Neches down there. Well, that's not going to just happen. You know, that's going to depend upon the private sector to come in. And I, for one, would like to be, I'd like to see what's out there. I'd like to, I mean, I know we had a couple of people talk at the town hall meeting in June about how they'd be willing to come in and invest and do something, but that's just talk. And until there's actually a request for proposals that people respond to, that's all it is. Would there be anything wrong with us putting out an RFP to gauge whether or not there is any interest in doing anything at the development site, which has been identified as the back parking lot of the Civic Center, back of the parking lot of the Civic Center? What would be wrong with doing that?
You asking me?
Yes.
So the chronological order would be you abate the asbestos, you take down the building, you clean up the site, do all the dirt work, so forth. That's what you do first. Then you come up with a plan on what amenities you want. In-house or hire an outside firm to do that plan. Then you go, after that, you would go out for proposals for a restaurant. It's timing. You're not going to go out for proposals right now to go build a restaurant when the site hadn't even been cleaned up, or no one's going to go make a decision until they know what the plan is, because their parking lot, the parking lot of the Civic Center and where they would build on that site ties directly, it's adjacent to this 3.7 acres, so it has to fit together, so it's all timing. And
No, Mr. Manager,
you can shake
respectfully.
your head, but we this is what we do. We in this room worked on and developed the event center, the Lakeside Center, go on down the list. We know how to do this, so we've done it many times. It's what our staff is skilled to do. So, I'm just telling you how it works. So you can go in a different order if you can get 4 votes.
Well, my whole point is that those are different sites.
No, they're all together. It's all part of one plan.
Well, I disagree. I think that the back parking lot of the north parking lot of the Civic Center is a very different site than the site of the 555 main building. But I don't know what would prohibit us from going out for requests for proposals and seeing if we had any interest in it right now. Because if we don't, then what I would like to suggest is for the city to consider doing a food truck park, as I brought before council before, because I still believe that it's going to be very difficult to get a brick and mortar restaurant to build back there. Maybe I'm wrong. But in the event that we don't, and we still want to develop something there, then I think an upscale food truck park like Celebration Station in Naples, Florida, would provide a very easy and inexpensive way to promote development and allow us to have food served down there, have a glass of wine or a glass of beer, and also have some other amenities such as the Celebration Parks did, such as music, a place to dock your boats. And we've talked about food trucks recently, and this could tie into that, because what we could offer food trucks is the ability to dump their gray water on site so they wouldn't have to move back and forth every day, to a commissary. They could dump their food trucks, gray water right there. They could have their grease traps right there. And you could get some really neat progressive things down there at Riverfront Park.
Thank you, Councilmember Samuel.
Mr. Getz, I understand your desire, and I appreciate your vision as to what you'd like to see. I will simply state, not to be argumentative, but I would just state my thought process. I think at this point, abatement is going to be the first thing we should focus on, getting the abatement cleared so that the building can be demolished. Then we begin to deal with the demolition of the building. Once we demolish the building, that will create a different view of the river and the space that we're looking at. That will allow opportunity for us to do the open green space and put possibly on an interim basis, an amphitheater, or on a successive basis, an amphitheater, and allow other things to be built around that. I don't foresee a problem with there being on a temporary basis as we go through this process. I don't see a difficulty in having a mobile food park. That can be something until we begin to see what this is going to be. And we also have to, a major component is going to be Riverfront Park to the whole scheme of the downtown area. So I believe going out for RFP before we even have a true understanding of what we want there and what we're looking at there. We continue to look at the opportunities. We continue to look at the visions that's presented. It doesn't have to be our overall vision, but we can define that vision as we move forward on as the space develops. So that's just, it makes sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me to go out for RFP to do a development when we hadn't even cleared the abatement, cleared the building, or refurbished the key component to the river, which is going to be Riverfront Park, to that area. So not to argue with you, but that's just my opinion, and I appreciate your opinion, and I just hope this council will think about how we move forward with this.
Thank you, Councilmember Turner.
Yes, my honest concern is I think the first thing we looked at was actually controlling the area. No matter what you do, before you build anything, you kind of know what direction you want to go prior to building it. You get your blueprints or whatever done, and that's almost with everything. And me personally, I don't feel like you should have to wait till a building comes down to start working on the master plan. It's one thing that I think we really not looking at is the grant opportunities that are out there with our resource on the riverfront, as well as the historic land downtown. I think it's a lot of grant opportunity we have to explore. And me personally, I would like to see all those options exercised, because you can look up and so much more can happen than the amphitheater or some of the things we talked about, because it's resources that are out there that we can actually utilize. And I would hate not to tap into that waiting. And we all know how the grant process works. The earlier you start, and we know it's going to take a few months to get this done. By the time the building's done, everything's clear, you can look up and those funds can actually be available. So me personally, that's how I feel. I feel like we should look into it. Even if staff's going to do it, that's fine. But I don't think we should wait till the building to come down and start working on the overall master plan. I think we should really look at what all opportunities are out there. And I think one thing we need to capitalize on is grant funding that's available. At least explore what's out there. And that's what I'm asking. Can we look at, instead of waiting until the building comes down, can we start working on what direction we want to go on now and see what grant opportunities are out there? Because there's free money out there, and we probably could do so much more than just what we are planning right now. So that's what I kind of want to challenge the council with. That's kind of my thoughts. And I just kind of want to see how everyone felt about that. That's the reason I'm saying I want to start looking at it now, because we can start applying for some of those things now if we identify that's the direction we want to go in.
I think y'all are saying two different things. There's you could work on a master plan now to be ready when the building comes down, the site's cleaned up. He was talking about going out for proposals for a potential restaurant, is what I heard you say. And you don't want to do that now, but you could definitely work on a master plan.
That's what I want to start on. I don't think we should have to wait for the building to come down.
So let's talk about grants for a second, because you bring that up quite a bit. That's not the way it works, okay? Let me explain to you why. If you knew what you were trying to do on that site, then once you have an estimated budget and a plan, then you could see if there's grants available to fund a specific project or amenity. But we don't go seeking grants without a project. I mean, you have to have a project in place that's approved first. So once the project is approved by the council, then yes, we see what opportunities are out there to fund it, whether it's a grant, cash, borrowing money. But you've been saying we should be applying for grants for the riverfront. That's how we're funding the bank stabilization. But the project's first approved by the council, then you go seek the funding, not the other way around. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but just to make myself clear, I'm saying develop a master plan and see where we're going. And kind of similar to what you just said, now we can see if anything matches what's out there. I'm saying, why are we waiting to do the master plan to the building?
Waiting.
So
we're
when
ready
are we
to go
going?
whenever the council wants to, but we've talked about this a number of times. We just acquired the site a few months ago, and it's taken us 3 or 4 months to get to this point, to put the specs together for the abatement, put the specs together for the demolition, which we're trying to complete right now. That takes months and months. It's not an easy process. So no one's delaying this whatsoever. The council just needs to make a determination. When do you want to start working on the detailed plans? And then, do you want staff to do it, or do you want to go hire an outside firm? That's up to y'all. So this is the first time we're hearing about maybe hiring. I know you brought it to me individually, but the council has to make that determination. I think that's why you put it on the agenda.
And let me make myself clear. When I say we should wait, I'm not saying we wait until after the building down, until before we come up with a plan. Hell, we've had plans since 2018. The plans have changed over time. We had a plan when we discussed purchasing the building a couple of months ago. We talked about a possible plan of what could be, because we looked at what's going on in Houston, the Woodlands or somewhere. So we have plans, but we don't spend the funds to do an engineering plan and do all that until we've given a clear vision of exactly what we want. And we're not at the point that, at least I am not thinking we are at a point that we've made it a clear decision of what we're going to do.
But I think the problem is we're not even having the conversations to get to the point.
We've been having the conversations for the past 6 months.
To get to the point of exactly what we want to do?
Before we even purchased the building, we were talking about what we would do with the building.
Yeah, we're talking about the possibilities. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, possibilities. How do we say, it sounds like.
Can I say something?
Sure.
I think y'all are both saying the same thing, and to kind of bring this to a head, I think what the council's saying is we're at a point where we'd like to start seeing some conceptual drawings of the master plan of where we're going.
Councilmember Felcher.
And I agree with that, but I know that we've discussed a lot. I have the plan in my head. I mean, I've seen the drawings that you presented to us, Riverfront Park, connecting to the AT&T site, the space that we would probably dedicate for the restaurants, and the green space that would probably, hopefully one day, move even beyond that. We talked about the amenities on the green space there at 555 Main Street. And now we've added possibility, the component of the Battleship Texas that would complement all this. So I guess I've seen it. What you presented to us, I've seen it. I don't. So
Seen it.
I
So
mean, I have it in my
I'm
mind.
glad that y'all brought
Now,
that up because you
so,
have seen it. So
I don't know what
staff
else-
could put that on a big
And I think probably you should.
and just start putting it downstairs in the foyer of City Hall. What has happened though is Councilman Turner has been sending us groups, outside groups, to come in and do a master plan. I said, wait. That's up to council to do that, not you. And he doesn't. He's only been on the council 6 months. So I said, so before you're bringing me all these groups to do a master plan, the council makes that determination. So I think he's at a point where he'd like some maybe outside group to come in and do that. We could put that together, what you saw upstairs in executive session and what we brought over there, when we had that town hall meeting. That's the plan. So when it was said earlier, and I try not to argue with him, but when he just said there's no plan even today, y'all know there is. It's been on paper. It was lined out with with big pictures of amenity 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's the plan. But I've made it clear in the capital program that's up to y'all. You could change it any day. We haven't gone out for bids yet. Why? Because it's not ripe. Meaning we're not going to go out for bids on something on a site it's not cleaned up yet. So we're trying to get to that point. But to Councilmember Turner's, what he's suggesting, if you want to hire an outside group, that's fine. It's just y'all need to decide if that's what you want.
And I'm not against doing that. I'm not. I'm not saying I'm against that. But I guess that question is, do you feel like our staff is capable of accomplishing the same thing? I mean, you haven't shown us yet where the bench is going to sit. The light pole is going to sit. The splash pad's going to be here. We haven't gotten down to that detailed of a plan, and so I acknowledge that.
Yeah.
But in my mind, I've seen the footprint, I guess is what I'm saying. You've shown us that. But do you feel like it's necessary for us to go out and hire a company to do this? Or do you feel like our staff is qualified and capable of creating this master plan in detail?
Our staff is more than qualified to do it. They've done it over and over. I mean, to the central fire station that we have, the new public health building, we hire architects to help us and engineers when needed. But again, the event center project, Lakeside Center, that was all staff driven. Again, you hire outside groups. But so if the council can go either way. If they'll let staff do their job, they'll get it done. Promise you that. If you want to micromanage this project, then I'd hire an outside master plan group to come in and do it and tell them what you want and work back and forth with them. And you just have to pay for it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Getz and then Councilmember Duria.
Okay, so I, for one, do not consider clip art that is photoshopped on a site a plan. It might be a concept you can look at, but I don't consider it a plan. There's a lot more to doing this than that. And as for what Councilmember Turner's talking about, I think I know the group that he's talking about that has, as I understand it, volunteered to donate their architectural services to help us design an actual plan. Now, we would need, I don't think you can accept it that way. I think you've got to go out for a request for proposals, but free is a pretty good price. And so you're chuckling, but if that is, if what I'm hearing is correct, you've got a world-renowned architectural firm willing to do that, then I would certainly want to talk to them about that in a little bit more depth, or see if is a price component to that, if there's an intermediary that has to go through. I'd like to know exactly how that would work, what that would look like. But yeah, I think that there's a lot more to a plan. I'd like to see a comprehensive plan, not just take the picture of what's over in the woodlands and plop it down on the site of the 555 building and say, here's your plan. There needs to be more to it than that.
I'm going to wrap this up. Mr. Councilmember Dury, I'll let you have the last remark on it.
Only thing I want to say, I don't think that Councilmember Turner was trying to bring in some other group to do it. I do know that I spoke to him and he just wants public input on what we're trying to do. I think that's what he explained to me. That's what he's been talking to different people in the community, and he's just trying to get input from the whole community, because this place is going to belong to the community. It's just not going to just belong to the council. And he's trying to get more input from different parts of the community as to what we should do with this property.
I think that's true. At the same time, this group has been sending, monthly retainer amounts and, wanting us to hire them for X amount a month and X amount for their overall services. And so that's the background you probably didn't know.
Well, Chris, actually, the same group we're discussing right now is the presentation that happened at Terrell Park, and you happened to be there along with Mike, and the mayor came in. So it's no secret about what's going on. Everybody know about the group. I didn't even instruct the group to originally contact them. The group in the email that said how they originally reached out to staff. And I don't want to get caught up in making it like I don't respect staff and their ability to do the work. That's not the case. What I'm saying is, I personally don't feel like when we're going to start talking about the possibilities, what if, and see what direction we're going in. I don't think we should wait till the building is down. I think we should start talking about the possibilities, get some things stitched in stone now. So once the building comes down and everything comes to fruition around 2023, we can have a smooth flow and a smooth transition, because we know it's going to be some changes. So I just kind of want to know, where are we going as a council on this? And I want to get feedback from everybody. And I want to make it clear, it ain't that I'm thinking staff don't have the ability. Even if staff does it as a group do it, when are we going to start working on it? That's what I'm asking the council.
Okay.
I agree with what he's saying. I would encourage you to move forward with the master plan. You just need to determine, do you want staff to do it, or do you want an outside group to do it? It's either way, it works.
Okay.
My recommendation would be for staff to do the master plan for us to have a good starting spot, and then we can determine where we're going from there.
I agree. That's a good idea.
Great idea. Thank you. So we're going to move to defibrillators in city buildings. And Councilmember Neal
Yes.
and
Okay.
Councilmember Getz.
All right, so we brought this subject up, I brought this subject up a couple of years ago, and it was following a tragedy where a musician in the Symphony of Southeast Texas had a heart attack and passed away at a performance. Currently, we do not have defibrillators in any of the city buildings that I'm aware of, but the idea at that time was that defibrillators should not be put in because of the training requirements necessary to have staff required to learn how to use a defibrillator. Since that time, the legislature has changed the law so that training requirements are no longer required. And defibrillators are proven to save lives. Defibrillators are used every day across the country, and they've progressed to the point where they are safe. They walk you through it. They talk you through it. They will not discharge if there's a rhythm, a cardiac rhythm. They will not discharge. So there's also been legislation that clarifies that a city or a citizen cannot be held liable for using a defibrillator. So what my proposal is to put defibrillators into the major city buildings where people congregate, like the Julie Rogers, the Jefferson Theater, the Event Center, City Hall, and the Municipal Tennis Complex, the athletic complex. So those 5 locations would be where I would like to see defibrillators. I think that there's some benefactors out there in the community that are considering, they haven't given approval yet, but that are considering helping fund defibrillators. They're not terribly expensive, but I think for the benefit of the citizens, I would feel better knowing that a defibrillator was on site in some of these buildings. I think that Kenneth Coleman and Chris Catalina were supposed to meet and come up with some recommendations or see if there's any problems with the idea of having defibrillators. I haven't heard back from that. I don't know.
What were your 5 sites?
The Julie Rogers, the Jefferson Theater, the Event Center, City Hall, and the Municipal Athletic Complex. And Municipal Athletic Complex because I'm aware of 2 people that have had heart attacks while playing tennis. One died, one did not, but a defibrillator on site would be important because you don't know how fast EMS is going to get there. And every minute counts once your heart has stopped beating. And so if you can get a defibrillator to them fast, the chances of revival and recovery are better.
Okay, so Chris Catalina and Kenneth Coleman. Kenneth Coleman's our public health director, as you know. Chris Catalina is our personnel director. They've worked with Emily Wheeler on discussing this issue. We did not recommend it a number of years ago. Now that the law has changed, we're open to it. There's pros and cons to doing this. It's a council decision, a policy decision. If you'd like to come forward and answer any questions that the council has, Councilmember Getz has thrown out, emails to Baptist about would they fund it. That's coming from him. It wasn't coming from us. We normally don't ask people to fund something we want to do. We have the money to do these type things without asking different people for money. So if the council wants to do it, we'll do it. Where do you stop? We have community centers, we have libraries, we own 100+ facilities out there. But we probably own 30+ where we have the public in them every day doing business. And so do y'all want to start telling us what buildings to put them in? You can. But so first the question is, do you want us to move forward? I don't think we need to rely on any outside group to pay for them. We can pay for them or enter into a contract. There's companies out there that'll come in and put them in and service them on a monthly basis, make sure the batteries are everything's working properly. So they'll do that for a fee. And again, it's based on the number of locations. So
Do we have a cost?
Yeah, what's the cost of it?
It would average, it depends on the company, but it would average like $100 per month per device, and it includes maintenance.
That's
And
it.
so they lease it to you?
You can lease or buy.
You can lease or buy, yeah.
Do you know what they cost to buy outright?
I don't have an exact cost.
Yeah, they range. I've seen them.
It's important to, work with the program the companies have, because they have staff that'll come out and do the monthly inspections and testing. And, our staff is not trained to do that, and that's why you would go with a program more like a lease program, because they can exchange it, maintenance, and do all the things that are required under the law.
But even if you buy them, that you can still use these companies to come out and do the monthly inspection at a reduced cost because you bought the device. So it's just a matter of whether or not you want to lease it or go ahead and make that investment. But yes, part of the legislation that the state passed does require monthly inspection of the devices. So you would want a company that's trained to be able to do that. I guess the other option is to have somebody on staff trained to be able to do that monthly for, I've said 5 locations. I didn't suggest community centers. I'm talking about where lots of people congregate, and the municipal athletic complex, because people are engaged in athletic activities, which unfortunately sometimes can cause cardiac arrest.
As our health director, where would you recommend having them at?
Well, I mean, if you're gonna start putting them in city facilities, you need to put them in every city facility that has people. I mean, your community centers have people. I mean, it's. I'm looking at it. You have one at the, let's say, the Civic Center, and then you have an event at Rogers Park that's in the community center, and you have someone go in distress, but there's not a defibrillator there, but there's one at the Civic Center. So, I mean, if you're gonna start
That's
putting them
my
up,
point.
you need to put them up in every city building that has people.
Well, but you can put them in 20 spots, and then you have a heart attack, and one of the spots you don't have one, so.
But as a
I
starting,
think it's a good idea.
as a starting place, could we look at saying, you know, we want to put it in every facility that has more than 100 people in it?
Well, think about the Jefferson Theater. I mean, Jefferson Theater may not always have a function there.
That's fine, but you got to start somewhere.
And you do, you have to start somewhere. But at $100 a month, I think we could designate more than 5 locations.
But I would think some places where people
You got a hike
were
and bike
likely to have,
trail.
like he said, the athletic complex, but also you got to think of a place like the Best Year Center.
Correct.
Elderly folks exercising. You know, that's a place where something can happen.
Well, that's
I think
what
it's a
I'm
good
saying. You pick
idea
starting
because
spot of
yeah.
every place that has over
Just-
100, and next
yeah.
year we might add more to it.
One thing to note, it's an absolute benefit to have a life-saving device in city facilities. We met with Emily, and at all large city events, EMS is present because Emily and staff schedule them. And then at all large private events, staff highly recommend hiring EMS, but it is optional. So those are the circumstances surrounded large events, city-sponsored and private. We also have to think about the expectation of city staff. Yes, they will know where the AED is located. They will, in an emergency, I suppose they would, go and grab the AED. I think the expectation will be on the staff to use it, which is the training's not required by law. So that's something to think about, with city staff and the expectation posed on them.
Wait a minute. I don't know that it would be expected that city staff do it. I mean that optimally would be great, but you would want the AEDs to be out there marked just like a fire extinguisher so that people know that there's an AED. In case there's no staff available, a member of the public could do it. So part of this arrangement that you have with these leasing companies is they come in and put the box that has the AED marked on the wall.
Councilmember Felcher, I'm sorry, city
Just-
attorney?
Go ahead.
No, you go.
Well, the only downside to this is the financial. I mean, are the two of you recommending that we not do this? He said there's pros and cons, and I get that.
I think we're just presenting the information. Like I said, it's an absolute benefit to have a life-saving device. Just wanted to give you all the information to make the decision.
Okay. Because we understand the the pros of this and how important it is, and not only to have it in the venues that have the most people, but in some of these venues you're going to have probably more than one, because they're large venues, they're large buildings, and you probably need more than one. So, I hate to see this boil down to just a financial decision because we're talking about saving people's lives. For me, it goes like to the argument of taking out fire extinguishers. Just take them. I know you can't, but I'm just saying it's there for a reason. But I was just curious if you guys are telling us you don't recommend this, or you don't want to take a position on it.
Now we
I think I'll take a position. The overall, the benefit is greater for the public. We think we should do it.
Okay.
And so when a council member brings us something that he's pushing, man or woman, any council member, that's fine. The council needs to decide this. The law's changed, so now we think there is a great benefit to doing it. He likes to pick and choose, and he's talking about 5 locations. Doesn't include the Civic Center, doesn't include Sterling Pruitt Center, doesn't include some other stuff. Meaning, we want to know, number one, if you say go do it, we're going to go do it. We'll do it our way. We'll pick and choose where we put these devices based on key staff that know what they're doing. And if you say go do it, we're going to go do it. It's not a money thing.
And I can see it
we're
could
good.
take time to do this because it may. I mean, I don't know.
But when a council member's trying to tell us the locations to go do it in, that's not the council member's role. That's the council. I mean, the council sets the policy, go do it. Let us go pick the locations.
Hey, I have no problem with that, Mr. Manager. I would just like to have defibrillators out here. And even if you had one here centrally downtown, you know, gosh, these buildings are pretty close together. You know, maybe you could run over to City Hall and get one, but,
They're open at different times.
you know, but I think we need to have defibrillators located where we have people congregate, and I have no problem with your staff picking out what the buildings are. So
Thank you,
that's fine.
Councilmember Duria.
One thing to remember, every piece of fire apparatus has a defibrillator on it. Every ambulance has a defibrillator on it. They're all over the city. You might ask Chief White, but I'm pretty sure their response times are under 5 minutes for sure, maybe even under 4 minutes. So that's almost 20 defibrillators stationed at different points around the city now. Not saying it's not a good idea to have them in some public buildings, but as far as determining where and how many, you have to take into account that all fire apparatus and ambulance apparatus have AEDs on them, and they could be there pretty quick.
If I might do the lawyer thing, we recognize the law has changed in this area, but this law does not totally exonerate a person in the usage of the defibrillator. If the conduct is willfully and wantonly negligent, there's still liability. And we all know we live in a world of reality, is if a person grabs a defibrillator off the wall and applies it to somebody and that person does not make it, that person's subject to get sued. May not be found to be liable, but will probably get sued. I mean, we have immunity as a municipality under the Tort Claims Act. We get sued all the time. So there is that consideration that needs to be made. When you ask about who's going to do it, is it going to be an employee who's going to do it? I would hesitate to apply a defibrillator to somebody for that very reason. I'm not trained.
They wouldn't be covered by the Good Samaritan law?
No.
They wouldn't?
And that was our only concern, is what would be the expectation of the city staff if they're at an event and someone goes into distress and someone say, is there a defibrillator, and the staff gets the defibrillator. At that point, what is the expectation of the staff? Is the staff supposed to use it, or is the staff can give it to someone else to use it? And that was the only concern. Not that it's a con, just something for us to think about, is what's going to be the expectation of the staff.
And Mr. Attorney.
I don't think it was ever the expectation for the city staff to be the one responsible for this. And I guess my next comment is back to what our attorney says. You know, if we get sued trying to save somebody's life, then I think so be it.
There may not be liability found, but you've got to go through the exercise. You have to go through the experience.
And you know, the reality is, a lot of times where you have a lot of people congregated, like at a performance of the symphony or at a event, you often have doctors in the audience, you know, and giving them the tools necessary to perform this exercise would be a good thing.
Well, we're not going to decide today if we're going to do it. So
Well, how do we go forward then?
we're going to have to put it.
If there's consensus or agreement that we think defibrillators are good in our public buildings, that's all you got to tell us, and we'll go do the rest. We'll buy them ourselves, contract with someone to do it, wouldn't come before the council, but we'll pick the buildings. But I need to know if 4+ want us to move in that direction.
I'm good.
Thank you, that helps.
Okay. Okay. Well, this concludes our vision workshop. Want to thank everyone for coming out today, and we will recess into executive session. Thank you for coming.